Hi, and welcome to the School Health Educators Podcast, where we discuss health education and how to best teach health ed in the K 12 setting. Hello, and welcome to the School Health Educators Podcast. I'm your host, Lori Reichel. Today's episode is focusing on the National Health Education Standard number 7, which we'll talk about in a moment. Before that's discussed, I would like to introduce today's guest, who is a superstar in the state of New York. This person's name is Jessica Butts. And Jessica, thank you so much for being here. Would you please say hello to our listeners, as well as tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lori, so much for having me. My name is Jessica Butts. I started teaching middle school life skills in 2002. I quickly became a campus health educator at SUNY Plattsburgh. And then I bounced from there down to Lehman College in the Bronx from 2005, 2006. All the while, though, something was driving me to work more in a middle school setting. I'd worked with a lot of different college-age students, and although I'm very proud of that work and I felt, really passionate, I felt that my heart and my soul were in a middle school. I thought back to my middle school experience and how I did not want middle school to be the worst time of my life that so many students, tend to describe it as. I wanted middle school to be the best years of my life. So I really felt passionate and strong that I needed to, find myself in a middle school setting. So in 2006, I was able to find a middle school health teaching job in Croton Harmon School District in Westchester County. I have been there since 2006, and so I teach grades 6, 7, and 8, and I love what I do. I'm a working mom of 3 very active teenagers and a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And I'm a partner to a small business owner who happens to work with cyclists and triathletes. So we have a lot of health and wellness passions in our family. And I'm so happy to be here with you today to discuss some of the wonderful learning experiences and skill-based practices that my students engage in.
And Jessica, you omitted your New York State Teacher of the
Oh,
Year award for health ed. What year was that?
that was in 2020, actually, 2020.
And congratulations
Yeah.
for that, a couple of years late.
Thank
And
you.
you also do a lot for the local health education teachers in your area by
Mhm.
putting together workshops to ensure people are as updated as possible with best practices, correct?
Mhm. Yes. So several years ago, there was a bunch of us who worked together during summer curriculum hours. So our school districts allowed us to work together and kind of align some ideas and share best practices, but it was a small cohort of teachers just from a few surrounding school districts. We found that it was so helpful that we wanted to expand it out. So I contacted a couple of our local BOCES centers and talk to their curriculum development team about how oftentimes health and physical education teachers, are limited as far as professional development opportunities are concerned. And sometimes we feel like we're, on an island of our own because many of us work with such a small department. In fact, I am the only health educator at the middle school. I do have a colleague at our high school, but it becomes sometimes a little bit isolating to understand if, how can I update this to make sure that I'm meeting the standards, and I need some fresh ideas and who could help me with that. So I figured what a better way than to offer some programming through BOCES, like we might attend different programs and workshops when new mandates come out or what have you. And so we have what we call a collegial circle, and we meet several times during the school year for half-day workshops. And we work together on practicing self-care. We share best practices with one another. Sometimes we'll bring in guests like Lori to give us some really important updates and professional development that we so often can benefit from. So we also have another consortium of folks that we call the Health Heroes. And so similar to the collegial circle, but this is offered to people in different counties. So we bring together at least 3, sometimes 4 counties worth of health and phys ed teachers, and we meet twice a year for a full day sort of local conference, if you will, because some of these folks aren't always supported or funded to be able to attend a state level or even a national level conference. So we try to provide that for them locally.
Thank you for providing all those services. And I think we need to have you back on an episode to talk about how people can do that in their own areas, if you'd be
That's
interested in that.
Yes, that'd be amazing.
Excellent.
Hmm.
Okay, so if we go to our episode's topic of the National Health Education Standard, number 7,
Hmm.
before I read what they are, I'll just say it like that. Would you mind telling me what comes to your mind when you think of that standard?
Sure. I think of the word modeling. I think of the phrase, the old school phrase, practice what you preach. And I think of providing students this foundational support for really developing lifelong behaviors that can contribute to their health and well being. Because I feel that when I'm in front of a group of young people, I need to make sure that not only am I respecting them, but I'm respecting myself as a person who incorporates health and wellness activities in their day to day lives. I don't want health education class to be considered just a checkoff box that they complete and they don't actually adapt and practice throughout the rest of their lives.
So when you say lifelong behaviors, I
Hmm.
think of that as standard number 7 is like these mini skills, a set of mini skills that come together.
Hmm. Yes,
Do you mind if I read off what's written out there for how standards read?
go for it.
Okay, so if you don't know, health education as well as physical education, we have information on the CDC website, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which I think is really cool that both of these disciplines have information on the CDC's website.
Hmm.
If you go to the page that reads Standards for Health Education, the CDC folks that put this together identify 2 different versions of standards,
Hmm.
national standards. So the first one I pulled up is from Shape America, and
Hmm.
standard number 7 reads students will demonstrate the ability to practice health enhancing behaviors and avoid or reduce health risks.
Hmm.
And then there's these grade spans underneath that people can explore. If you go to the National Consensus for School Health Education, standard number 7 reads students demonstrate observable health and safety practices.
Hmm.
And then if you go to the New York State guidance document for health education, there is a chart
Hmm.
for self management, and it breaks down, like the other standards, the national standards, it breaks down
Hmm.
what to do for grade levels. In the New York State guidance document for self management, it reads students demonstrate the ability to practice strategies and skills to enhance personal health and safety.
Hmm.
So, those are 3 different ways that you can look at standard 7. And
Hmm.
again, I think of standard number 7 as all these mini skills that like we do on a regular basis.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing how you teach this? I know that when we first connected for you to be a guest on the podcast, you had noted how about standard 7? And like that was the one I was going to say because I think we need to put on the table standard 7 is unique where it's not just this one grand overall skill, it's a whole bunch of mini skills.
That's
So
right.
how do you teach this in the classroom?
Great question. So the Nemours Foundation that puts together kidshealth.org, if you're not familiar with that website, I highly recommend. They have some really great updated current content for not only children, they also have a section for teenage students, and they also have 2 other sections, one for parents and one for educators. And so the medically reviewed information, the content-based information is a really great way to make sure you have, the most up-to-date information before you get in front of your group of students to teach. I also love it because they do provide a limited amount of skill-based practices that teachers can look through and maybe adapt. So one of those skills-based practices is asking students to participate in an activity that they refer to as SELF, SELF, sleep, exercise, leisure, and food. And what it asks students to do is identify kind of their routine surrounding each one of those components. I've used this several years ago, probably about 10 years ago now, and I adapted it into more of how can I kind of make it a little more current and catchy. And so I call it either healthy selfie, because everyone's familiar with what a selfie is. Sometimes I also refer to it as 30 days to your best selfie. I'll explain a little more about what that looks like as far as student facing. But I added a couple of letters to their acronym and I changed it up a little bit to meet the needs of the students that I work with. So for our work, sleep, exercise, love, food, intellect, and emotions is how we define that acronym SELFIE. And the students acknowledge and analyze their behavior surrounding each of those components. However, students, even though in a middle school, they'd like to tell us that they're capable of being completely independent, we all know that their brains are at a point where they're pretty undeveloped. So they oftentimes need to lean in and have support in their decision making, in their ability to think through risks and consequences, and to really think through the behaviors that they participate in. That being said, I do believe that they can learn how to practice independence with a lot of health enhancing behaviors. So I kind of like this to meet a lot of different standards and a lot of different skills. And I spend a lot of time with the students working through and kind of promoting the things that I do to have a healthy selfie, right? So we oftentimes limit how we perceive people's health as just the physical, but yet we neglect sometimes that it's so much more than the physical components. Yes, we all need to exercise, but what does that also do for our mindset? And how does that benefit our mental and emotional outlook? So a lot of the time we spend is getting students to understand that health is so dynamic, but it's an everyday part of their lives, not just a class that they might sit through and complete it in a middle or a high school setting.
What do you call your unit again? What was that called?
Healthy selfie.
And what does that stand for?
So the S is for sleep, E, exercise, L, love, F, food, I, intellect, E, emotion.
How do you introduce it? Like, what's the unit look like?
Yeah, so students, right now, actually, this time of year, we're starting to work on a little bit of goal setting and a little bit of healthy decision making. And so I try to combine those two skills with this particular, I guess you would call it a project because of the different tasks that they would have to complete. But they kind of do a little bit of a health journaling experiment where they're jotting down what time they went to bed, how they felt when they woke up, does their sleep pattern change on a vacation or a weekend, and why? And for each one of those components of the selfie title, they're kind of just giving a little bit of information and thinking through their choices, their decisions that they make surrounding food and how they react in situations when they're feeling emotional. And they kind of have this little bit of a gut check about where their health is right now, who they rely on for that support, and what they could do to set some goals surrounding it so that maybe it can become more of a positive mindset and a positive practice for them instead of having different conflicts with the adults in their lives who might be making some choices for them that they don't want them to make, but yet they don't have the skills in order to communicate that to them.
And that's such an age appropriate time. I mean, seventh grade, they're not children anymore. They're teens, yet
Yeah.
they still need adult figures in their lives. I mean, legally, they're supposed to have a guardian until a
Mhm.
certain age, yet they're acknowledging that they're getting older. And once they
That's
hit
right.
8th grade, they're like the cool kids, the oldest kids in the school and all.
That's
So
right.
right now, how are they receiving your unit? Like, what's their response?
So right now they, so far so good. They actually like to really talk about the things that they do as individuals. They like to kind of check in with themselves like, "Oh, well, I'm not getting enough sleep because our school has to start so early in the morning." So that in itself becomes a whole sort of class discussion about, will school start times actually help you get more sleep, or will it then just push everything that you like to do after school to later at night, which would then put you in bed later at night. And therefore, it's so I always say, let's talk about this, let's dive in. But it's really on you to adjust your sleep habits and your sleep schedule and make it work for, the people that you live with, that trusted adult, that family member. They have expectations for you, but you also should have some expectations on yourselves as well, not just blaming it on school start time.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so it's sleep, exercise.
So I say love. So either the things that you love or the people that you love, whether it's time with your pet or your absolute favorite activity that you like to do, that brings you that joy and that connection.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And how do you get them to process that? Like, is there a certain activity you do?
Yes, so they brainstorm different ways that, they either calm down or that they connect back to themselves and their priorities. And many of them will, list things like music or time on my phone or just watching silly movies or taking a walk. And so they'll mention those different self-management strategies that they all use to when they're having a bad moment or when they're feeling upset and they might need a little bit of a calming strategy.
How do you put in the concept of food? So what do you do with that?
Oh, right. So,
Because a
yes,
lot of
yeah.
people have these huge nutrition units, and food is like how we eat. There's so many different aspects of why people eat the way they eat and stuff like that. So how are you handling that?
So, primarily, we talk a lot about food as fuel, and we view some different clips that kind of provide the students with the understanding of if you're in a vehicle and it's driving you to a certain destination and it runs out of the fuel or the power, the electric power it would need to go, what happens? And they say, well, you're not going to be able to get where you're going. And so we use that as an example. We also look at an experiment, a science experiment, where one plant that's growing and being nourished, has the energy and the wherewithal to continue to grow. Another plant that is not given that nourishment and that water or hydration that they might need, doesn't it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't kind of develop in the way that it's meant to. And so we kind of equate that to students really working through hunger cues and having foods that they can use as fuel to their bodies, because many of them in a middle school, especially in a seventh grade, tend to either skip breakfast because they don't have time or they don't feel hungry. So we work on dealing with your hunger cues and how maybe you're not hungry at 7 a.m., but maybe by 10 a.m., you really need to break up that fast and have a snack available to you and things of that nature. We also talk a lot about how students that have after school activities, they've gone most of their day learning, and how much of that energy that they have, their brain has used up for learning. Now they've got to power their body to get through their dance rehearsal or their taekwondo practice or their sports practice. Even if they're going to play an instrument, that's going to take a different set of energy that their body needs to refuel. So we try to avoid talking about specific, we don't use calorie counting, and we try to avoid talking about the body as a shape or a size. And we really focus in on at their growth and development stage in life, the food that they're putting in and the water and the beverages that they're putting in are meant to help them grow.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. But
Such
I
a
will
healthier
say,
way. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. I will say that for health educators, it is a very difficult, nutrition is a very difficult content area to teach because, first of all, it's constantly changing. And what
Hmm.
a lot of us have grown up with, the ideals that we are influenced by in the media, play a big role. And so it's a very challenging line to walk with young people who might be influenced by other factors. So if I could recommend, if there was one specific way to teach about an ingredient in a food to middle school students, I would say hone in on sugar, but not as far as like sugar intake, but just explaining the science behind sugar and what
Hmm.
happens to sugar in the body and why our bodies need it. But yet, what can happen if the body says, oh, too much?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, the I for your selfie stands
Yeah.
for intellectual, I
Intellect.
believe,
Yes. Yes.
or
Yes.
intellect, excuse me,
Yes.
intellect.
Yes.
So, what do you do for that?
Oh, so again, it's back to this idea that in seventh grade and, well, any middle school age student up until well beyond high school has that undeveloped prefrontal cortex, but yet their midbrain, their emotion center, their limbic system, their amygdala, they are all firing at full throttle. And so a lot of the students that I work with and that you work with in middle and high school settings make their decisions a lot of the time not based on thinking, but based on what's right in the moment when they feel emotions or risks, or they're excited or nervous and they react to those emotions because that's the part of their brain that fires and signals them to make a choice and to behave in a certain way. So I really try to hone in on how parts of our brain need that little bit of extra time and care to think through why we do what we do. In the school district I work for, we call this critical thinking. So the thinking surrounding why and always having a why. Well, what are you thinking and why to back up what it is you're going through with?
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And that brain is so important. Like we have to take care of that brain. That's why, yeah, we just have to take care of that brain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Last but not least, what do
Emotions.
you do for the emotion aspect of your selfie?
Yeah, so I'm lucky to I work in a school district where we have adapted a lot of emotional intelligence curriculum. And so our students are savvy with checking in via a mood meter or some sort of feelings thermometer throughout their day and acknowledging that we all have feelings, whatever the feelings that we're experiencing in the moment, we can acknowledge that, we can recognize those. But are those feelings the ones that we want to linger? If so, wonderful. How are we going to let them continue? If not, what are we going to do to kind of shift into sort of a different part of that emotions thermometer or mood meter? So we try to encourage our students to say, I'm feeling really, whatever it is, angry, frustrated, sad, depressed, what have you. But do you want to stay in that or do you want to shift? And how are you going to do that? Are you going to take deep breaths? Do you need a quick walk down the hallway? Do you need just a sip of cold water? Do you need to talk about it with somebody else, a trusted adult that's maybe not in this room right now, we can access? So we work hard on identifying emotions and then figuring out, do we want to stay within that emotion or do we need to change?
Now, I want to ask, and you can pass on this because I know this is your intellectual property and all, but I know you love to share things too. So you have the right to pass, though. How are you assessing this unit?
Great. No, it's great. I'm glad you asked. So this this is going to be a new assessment. So I'm trying something new this spring with these seventh graders who are going through the healthy selfie. So what in my kind of dream world I'm hoping to happen, I'm hoping that the students are going to be comfortable doing a peer review and we're going to use a walk and talk format. So my plan is in a nice, hopefully climate day to take our students outside and have different prompting questions for them to answer as they walk and talk. And each time they lap around a certain area, I'm hoping that they're going to come back and complete a quick peer review. So they're going to talk with a classmate or two, and then they're going to come back, check it off, write a little bit of a reflection, something that they thought about differently from their peer, etc., and then do another lap and continue so on about 5 or 6 times to get them sharing with one another. Then I'm hoping to have that connection to a family member or a trusted adult, because part of this work gives them a lot of different choices. It's a choice board activity. So some of those choices would really have to be completed at home. I can give you a couple of examples if you're interested. So students could choose to make a reusable shopping bag from an old t-shirt and repurpose it. So that kind of activity is probably not going to be able to be completed within a class time or even within the school setting. So that might be something that they can connect with a trusted adult or a family member and work together on. And part of their assessment will be that trusted adult or family member completing an assessment rubric, to see all the things that they did, how they reflected, and the process that they use. It's not about just saying, I did all these activities. What kind of process did the students use to complete those activities?
Wonderful. Wonderful. And your personality is so wonderful. I could just
Oh,
see the middle school students loving being in your presence. And I miss the middle school. That was my favorite grade level to teach because they do need caring people. But I see you as the perfect fit for
thank
middle
you.
school.
Thank you. It's definitely never boring. There are a lot of emotions, but I will say that, the middle school vulnerability that exists can really be honed in a positive way. I
Hmm.
often say in the middle of a class, because they'll kind of gripe and grumble at me, well, you've already told us this. And I just respond with a ba da ba ba ba. And they say, I'm loving it. And I say, well, yeah, you are loving it, but how do you know that you're loving it? And they say, oh, because we've heard that. We know that slogan, that jingle. And I say, I'm just trying to give you my own jingle so that you'll remember and think back and be able to practice this as you grow up and as you change into your young adulthood.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we end this episode?
Yes, I'd love to share a couple of exciting projects that I'm working on to pilot. So, this healthy selfie idea, I'm hoping that I'm also going to be able to adapt it for what we call our passion project for our school district. So a lot of school districts have these different goals for their faculty and staff. And one of our district goals is that every member of our faculty will have a passion project that they work on throughout the school year and that they share with their colleagues. And mine happens to be focused on staff wellness to avoid burnout and stress levels. So I'm hoping to adapt this healthy selfie idea to, have a lot of my colleagues participate in it. Obviously, the activities would change because they would be all adults, but the idea would stay the same. And then I'm really hoping that the walk and talk idea would be part of it and things of that nature.
So, what you're saying to do for the staff, that is focusing on employee wellness, which we know is part of the WISC model, the whole school, whole community, whole child coordinated school system for employees. That's fantastic.
Yes. 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 Thank you for pointing that out. Definitely. So again, back to what I was saying earlier, if we are not practicing what we preach to our young people, if we're not able to demonstrate that, then how are we going to have the wherewithal and the mindset and the energy to be able to practice our teaching practice? So I'm a really big believer in that. And I'm a really big believer in providing opportunities for school staff to get involved in health and wellness activities throughout their day, because I find that it makes the building feel and it's just a better result for our students that we work with.
Wonderful.
Yes. So the next thing I'm really excited about for our state level conference that Lori and I are very lucky to be a part of year after year for New York State AFERD, I'm hoping to initiate a book club. And that book club, although it's in its very early stages of being developed, is really meant to not only help health educators adapt maybe different pieces of literature into their curriculum, but it's truly a way for teachers to practice self-care because reading and discussing and diving into a book can be so beneficial for a lot of people's health and well-being. So we're hoping to have those kind of twofold goals at hand. So getting people sort of involved with different works that are out there that can help us integrate into the curriculum for health education, but also to practice self-care and some very much needed mental and emotional health.
Wonderful. And
Yes.
again, thank you so much for everything that you do. You're just phenomenal, Jessica. If
Mm.
people would like to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Sure. So best way to reach me is via email. I could be reached at jessica.butts at chufsd.org. That's the best way to get in touch with me. And then I wanted to share a very quick preview. I'm super excited to be working on a team of authors. I'll be co-authoring a resource for elementary health teachers. So stay tuned for more information about that as we navigate that different process.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll put a link for, well, not a link, but we'll put your email
Yes,
in today's episode's description so
yes.
people will have access to that. And Jessica is also going to return for the next episode because we're going to flip things in which I'm going to share a unit I've actually have been currently doing with my college students. They're
Nice.
being trained to teach in the K through 12 setting. I want to go over how we're doing a unit in this class focusing on standard number 7. And Jessica, you are free to ask me any questions you want. So Jessica is going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you so much for today, Jessica. I
Thank you.
appreciate hearing your ideas and again, all of your positive energy. Would you like to say goodbye to our listeners for the
I
day?
would love to. Thank you so much for having me, Lori, and thank you for listening. I hope that you can benefit from this in some way, shape, or form.
I'm sure people will for sure. A reminder to our audience, I thank you so much for listening in first, but please remember to follow this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Also, check out the website schoolhealtheducators.org. There's been some of us putting more information on there that is for anybody that teaches school health. We want to make sure that we have positive resources available. And remember, you make a difference. You matter. Thanks for doing what you're doing and stay well.
Bye bye.